We can't all be destiny's darlings. Has ever a truer thing ever been said? And what does it mean? And who said it? Well, I'm saying it now, but I first heard the phrase about 30 years ago, and you won't find a reference to it. And the reason you won't find a reference to it is because it was said during a lecture, which was never transcripted, by a guy called Manly P. Hall, who was a kind of esoteric thinker. And he was talking about, I suppose, things like depression and anxiety and how to find your place in the world and how to navigate the world in a sane way. And he came up with this phrase, which was, "We can't all be destiny's darlings." Why the hell I was listening to Manly P. Hall, I don't remember, but I guess it's to do with that sort of post-adolescent attempt to try and figure out what life is all about. Before we, of course, realise that it isn't about anything. Back then, it's a riddle to be solved. And everybody goes off in their own tangent and tries to find their salvation in one way or another. I remember one of my best friends at university, who seemed to be a very sane young woman, probably the most mature of the students that I met at university in many ways. I remember calling her about 5 years after I'd left university. And I think I was feeling pretty low at the time. I can't remember exactly, but I've got a feeling that, I was saying that things weren't great. And she told me that the answer lay in the teaching of Sai Baba. And she'd recently been to India, and she now lived her life through the words of Sai Baba. Now, Sai Baba was one of those Indian gurus who kind of arrives in a kind of Rolls Royce or whatever, and then he was famous for making Rolex watches appear by magic hand. Well, I guess at the time I must have been maybe I was pretty desperate. Maybe there was a part of me that was still open to the possibilities that the world could be solved in some way. And I remember actually getting hold of this book of Sai Baba. And now, whether or not she sent that book to me, or whether or not I'd picked it up from a library, or whether or not I'd actually bought the bloody thing, I can't remember. But of course, the whole thing was just a silly con. Just another man pretending to be a prophet. And other friends sort of disappeared into Catholicism and, various other pastimes in order to try and save themselves. I remember one guy, he was a kind of hippie, cannabis smoking, stoned most of the time, kind of musician-y type, quite an interesting guy. And I remember meeting him, would have been in about I guess he'd be in his about mid-20s. And I saw him outside a pub. I kind of went, "Oh, how's it going?" And I think maybe I said, "Are you coming for a drink?" Or, "Do you want to go back to Dave's and get stoned or something?" And I remember him saying, No, I'm into fitness now. What a strange thing to say. And fitness had become his religion. And he was sort of in the gym 4 hours a day and every day, 7 days a week. And, he was like that for years and years and years. So we all have to find our way. So there we are. I was reading Manly P. Hall, or watching him. And there he comes up with this phrase about destiny's darlings. Now, we all know what destiny's darlings are, don't we? The chosen ones. The ones who seem to have, through sheer luck, fate, happenstance, the force of destiny, seem to have found a route through this world. Like God has shone his light on them. And there's a lot of people like that now, of course, because most of them are TV stars, aren't they? Actors, actresses, musicians, great writers, maybe some of the great writers, not all writers, but some of the really successful ones. And people who are in sort of popular sports now. These are the chosen ones. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? You know. How come they are sort of elevated and famous, and why are they tripping the line? Fantastic. They don't have to worry about money. They got houses in Miami and New York and London and Monaco. You know, Lewis Hamilton and all the racing drivers. I can drive. I passed my test at 16 or 17. 17th birthday, I think I passed it. I can drive. Well, what about the rest of us? The vast majority, the 99.99 recurring for a very long time, who are just ordinary. Why couldn't we be Destiny's darlings? Those to whom destiny has chosen for that otherworldly life, magic place, fame and fortune and wealth and everything that comes with it. It's a strange thing, isn't it? What's the difference? How come them and not me? Do I have to stay ordinary for the rest of my life? Is it not too late to become one of Destiny's darlings? Reminds me a little bit of that, of the song Cleaning Windows by Van Morrison. Van Morrison, of course, who went known as Van the Man, because critically many people say that he is the music, that he contains within him the soul of music. He's got his critics, but you know, if you really listen to his work, it's very difficult to argue that he isn't someone whose destiny found him and swept him up and, you know, took him on a journey that was inevitable. What a voice. What soul. So the song he wrote, Cleaning Windows, was about when he was a window cleaner, whistling a happy tune up a ladder in Dublin. Why didn't he stay up that ladder cleaning windows? There are lots of window cleaners I know who can sing. They potentially could sing. Loads of window cleaners I know who could sing. I actually do know one, actually, a guy called John Bradshaw, and he really can sing and play guitar, and he's been a window cleaner for 35 years. And Van was a very special man. Well, still is. I mean, you know, he's gone a bit mad now. He's gone all sort of conspiracy theory, but that's just the virus. The virus has caught everybody now, so there are very few pockets of survivors now. So yeah, Van's caught the virus. He's a kind of mad anti-vax conspiracy theorist and gone loony like many others, but it's just a virus he's caught. But why didn't he stay on that top of that ladder just singing When I'm Cleaning Windows? What swept him off? I mean, you could say, well, you know, there's the phrase, isn't there? Talent will out. In other words, if you're talented, somehow it will get recognised, and eventually you'll be found, and you will become the darling of destiny. That's absolute bullshit, isn't it? Absolute rubbish. Plenty of talented people who have not succeeded in any way, shape or form. And I don't mean succeed necessarily in terms of wealth, but just succeed in terms of being able to reach their own kind of inner potential in that lovely way where you do what you love and you get paid for it. Ultimately, it's luck. It's pure happenstance. In other words, it's not something you can engineer. You can be extremely talented. You can be courageous. You can be fearless. You can work as hard as you want. But without those little touchstones, pure luck. And it's not going to happen. By and large, I'm not making a generalisation. But if you actually read, I'm reading 3 biographies at the moment. Peter Sellers, Alfred Hitchcock, and a third one, which is, I can't remember, I've gone blank on the third one. It'll come to me. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin and Alfred Hitchcock were born in London in sort of 1890s, around there. And it was pretty impoverished. It was very tough. Charlie Chaplin's mother had, was living from room to room, and, may have been even involved in selling sex to try and keep going. But through a series of kind of events, they became some of the greatest icons in showbiz there are. But if you look at all the old Greek myths, if you look at Shakespeare, you'll see that what they call fate is not sort of handed out fairly. And that's the point. It's something that they don't necessarily deserve. Because there's a lot of talentless people who seem to be Destiny's darlings now. 30 years ago, when Manly Hall said that, I guess most of Destiny's darlings were people who were talented in some way. But now anyone can get on TV. You have the most awful people who've appeared on reality shows who have made millions of pounds, and, girls on OnlyFans who are making $1 million a month, showing their bums, whilst you're slaving away as a nurse for $30,000 a year. It isn't fair, but then the universe isn't fair, and as all those great myths tell us, it's just the way things are. Life is simply not fair. It's just a completely random thing. There is no divine favour for the good people. There is no divine favour for the hard workers. Don't expect it. It's not going to come. I mean, everybody's suffering, even those people who seem to be Destiny's darlings, they suffer just as much, if not more. I mean, look at Britney Spears, alone, dancing around that pole for her Instagram every day, in that empty house that's full of clutter, filth on the floor, on the edge, on the cusp of mental illness all the time. She is Destiny's darling. I mean, what an incredible, extraordinary life. Yes, we'll write books about it, but you wouldn't want to change places with her, really. Estranged from her family. So we're all suffering. If you turn your suffering into a kind of strength, then in a way you are moulding your fate to some extent. You're saying, let me have it, and I'll twist it into something amazing. There's something you can do independent of divine favour. You can see your life, in a way, as a kind of piece of creative work, rather than just sort of something which you're determined by, rather than determining, and you can just sort of say yes to life despite your situation. I mean, a lot of people who have a lot of people who've had the realization or come to the conclusion that life is meaningless can always find meaning if they decide that today they will make tomorrow a little bit better in some way. You can always apply that. You can never really say that my life is meaningless, because there are certain things which do have meaning. One of them is pain. And pain is coming. So if you can avoid it tomorrow by doing something today, then that is incredibly meaningful. So you can kind of bypass the lack of meaning in life by doing that. So in many ways, you don't really want to be Destiny's darling, because that means you've been thrown into a sort of world which then kind of determines who you are, rather than the other way around. Sometimes it's better to stay quiet, stay in the shadows. The kind of quiet dignity of ordinariness is absolutely fine if you apply those basic principles I've mentioned. And you can kind of then live at ease with your own fate. you won't need the sort of recognition and the sort of acknowledgement that often Destiny's darlings do eventually crave.